Global Indian Network. Print, TV, events, podcasts. Find out more at globalindianseries.com.
Welcome back to the Global Indian Podcast, home to the greatest conversations and the official platform for people of Indian origin. Yes, that's right. We are everywhere. Now, you know, every single week. In fact, for the last 100 weeks consecutively, we have been plunging into the human experience behind our perceptions of identity, taking a second look at the countries we now call home, and tackling some of the biggest, greatest conversations that we have ever seen. We have built the world's greatest living time capsule that really is reflective of the times in which we live. In this episode, I'm joined by my dear friend and partner in crime for right at the beginning of these stories, Kulvinder Ghir, as we have a look back at some of the biggest stories that have had impact and also the key findings on this journey and quest for understanding identity. But before we get there, here's Alex with our 50 Shades of Brand News, telling you the biggest headlines affecting our community this week. Over to you, Alex.
The Global Indian Series News Bulletin, 9th of February 2022. On February the 6th came the sad news that Lata Mangeshkar, the Nightingale of India, had died at the age of 92. She was cremated with full state honours in Mumbai's Shivaji Park. Prime Minister Narendra Modi laid a wreath on her funeral pyre. There followed 2 official days of mourning, which came to an end yesterday. The northern Indian state of Uttar Pradesh begins a 7-phase election later this week to choose a new government. Commonly known by its initials UP, the state is India's most populous, with an estimated population of 240 million people. An Indian student has now spent nearly 2 months in jail for celebrating Pakistan's victory in a cricket match. He was arrested for supporting Pakistan in a T20 match against India. He and some of his fellow students also stand accused of displaying pro-Pakistani slogans on campus. British comedian Jimmy Carr has been widely condemned for joking that, and I quote, "nobody talks about the positives," in reference to the Nazi murders of hundreds of thousands of people from the Roma, Sinti and traveller communities. On Monday, Prime Minister Boris Johnson's official spokesman said it was unacceptable to make light of genocide, adding that the government will be making sure the streaming services are more accountable. And finally, today marks an important milestone in the history of the Global Indian Series. It's our 100th consecutive podcast. Long may it continue.
Hi, my name is Divya and I'm co-founder of the Global Indian Podcast. Before you get to today's show, I've got a quick favour to ask. If you've been enjoying our conversations, I'd love if you could take just 1 minute to leave us a review on the platform that you're listening to us on and share our work to friends and family. It helps us out a lot. Word of mouth is the primary way that we grow. Thanks for your continued support.
Hi, my name is Nestor Alfred, CEO of St. Lucia's Citizenship by Investment. Think freedom. What comes to mind? Freedom to explore, to travel to any destination for work or play? Or is it freedom of expression? Being surrounded by the globally minded, those who care for society and environment. Every year, people from around the world apply for St. Lucian citizenship because they realize that real freedom is based on choice. Discover more about St. Lucian citizenship and how it's helping global Indians achieve more.
My name is Chitra Stern and I am a proud Global Indian Ambassador and CEO of Martiniale Resorts and Martiniale Residences. We pride ourselves on the journeys that define a community, and our developments bring people together. Did you know that over 70,000 people just like us call Portugal home? The Global Indian journey has brought people together in a meaningful way, and on behalf of all of us at Martiniale, we want to thank you for joining us in these remarkable conversations. We look forward to seeing you here in Lisbon post-COVID. Have a great day.
And just move. Get up and just move. Get up and just move. Get up and just move.
Cully, 100 episodes in, we kicked off something that we came up with an idea in the garden of saying, well, what would be possible? Obviously, this is at the beginning of COVID, a very weird, wonderful world of what it is. And now 100 episodes later, we're having over our own ambassadors across the globe.
Yeah.
We've taken some of the biggest subject areas. We've won awards for the platform as well. And more importantly, I think that we've done something very honest, is this time capsule of sorts that looks at the honest lives of what it means to be human.
Absolutely.
What's going through your head right now?
It's really going back to day one, because the whole idea at that time, we were seeing that, we should like have a picnic and bring all these different individuals and these different stories and celebrate them and their achievements as much as the individual itself, what got them there, in their sense of development of what they want to do with their work. So I think that's where we want to do, and all the different elements that these individuals can bring to the picnic. And why a picnic? We always said was that it should be open, it should be free, it should be. There's no sense of a judgment within it, or an opinion, or a criticism. It's just celebrating the individual where they are at that particular time.
Yeah, absolutely. Because when we go back to those first initial conversations, I know we spoke off air. We had Manan Pandya, this rapper from the US, who comes on a larger than life. We had Alicia Popper, and even 2 years on, a lot of these people have had huge successes on the back. Now, Alicia's become this incredible singer in Germany, from all places, competing in The Voice Germany. Anissa Singh has now become one of our ambassadors. She's wrote a book about what she went through. And that story that she told was the first time she opened up about some of the biggest issues that took place in her life, unfortunately, was domestic violence and abuse. But
it's those hurdles and those how they tackle those hurdles and reach further within themselves. I think it's an achievement, and a self sort of liberation, how they kind of heal themselves, if not a joy in it.
What do you see on the outside end? Because obviously you're listening in from afar and you're hearing these stories that come together, but there's always this golden thread, isn't there? Some that connects people. And one thing that we've noticed is 48 countries have now kind of joined in onto this game of identity. And in a really nice way, because we dealt with the darkness of South Africa during those riots. We covered it live from the ground. We had, I think, in some of the podcasts.
Rajan has been extraordinary, hasn't it? Because not only that, we've had COVID, we've had Brexit here, we've had Black Lives Matter. I think the world we've seen how small it's grown in communication, and the wonderfulness of togetherness as well.
Yeah, and I think we've also done something of almost like nostalgia. I know this seems like a real strong congratulatory self-patting on the back type of moment, but I think we deserve it after many, many hours of work with us.
Especially you, because you've kept with it. That's your endeavors. That's your passion for something, of knowing of the other. That's been for you. I think it's a joy. I mean, that's why I'm your mate.
I think I'm standing on the shoulders of the giant that is Kulvinder Ghir, so it's a lot easier for me to be able to do that. But I think, going back to that, I think the impetus was you.
Saying I'm only 2'1", I'm not that big a bloke. But my shoe size is around about size 11.
There you go. As I said, the camera really makes you look bigger. That's what it is. But it is. I think what was fascinating, and what still is fascinating, is these ongoing journeys, because we've caught people in the midst of the biggest pandemic of our time. And it's
Yeah.
this uniting factor that really, I think, started up a void for everybody across the globe saying, well, what the hell is it all about? What does it mean to be human? What's it like to actually now have to deal with a lack of routine? What's it like that all of a sudden I'm no longer my career because I'm stuck at home in my four walls?
Yeah.
And you call people almost off guard because traditionally, the media will come in and they've got these pre-arranged scripts, that they'll definitely do on podcasts. And with us, all of a sudden, it went out the window. It was like their brains frazzled up, and there's this incredible mooring ground that everyone could be really open and honest.
It's allowing us a little bit of control, isn't it? With the internet, and we can go out there, and now we can go scan the world itself, and that's the joy of maybe the internet itself, that we can share these stories and we can connect with the world in different parts. But that, I mean, I don't mean that one should always work from home to do that because it's like taking a photograph always through the camera, looking at the world always through the camera. Sometimes it's better to put the camera down and just have a look with your own eyes. There's nothing better than that, I think, Rajan, for your experiences traveling the world.
Oh my God, it was such a shock, wasn't it? It's like coming back, so so people can understand where this came from. It's coming back to the UK, and you can't travel. Flights are not leaving. And so everything that was normal for me was just out the window because I was so used to catching a flight, going to a new location and kind of discovering it. But then there's this beauty of it because I know it's going to sound cheesy, but it's not meant to be.
Okay.
I felt that I've rediscovered the world in a very different wise over the course of these conversations, because when you're in a country, you normally talk and you have these snapshot images with people. You spend an hour, 2 hours, but something happens in the fragility of a human being where they've been at home for months on end. You have a microphone on them and they're known, celebrated minds, right? So they're really known people, but you put a microphone on them and you say, there's no expectations in your back. You don't need to sell anything. You don't need to talk about anything. I just want to know about you. And there's this magic that happens because it rekindles some type of, maybe it's a primordial part of being a human that people then just open up and say, look, this is what I
hope so.
Like.
I really hope so, because that was the initial idea, is to make them feel relaxed and feel open, and we didn't want to create a sense of judgment in any sense, and again, it's to celebrate that in the individual's diversity, if that's the right word politically. I don't know. I don't know.
And that's another one, isn't it? It's when did that happen? At the midst of COVID, where people are thinking, are we as a civilization going to survive this? Somehow, not only did we kind of look through COVID, we started turning ourselves into these real strong cliques. In a really sad way, it kind of separated us. It made us and them, and it's weird.
Yeah, but we're progressive. We can move on from that as individuals. Saying that we can look beyond our ethnicity in that sense. Even let me get my teeth in. Ethnicity, ethnic differences.
You got that.
And tolerate and be sensitive enough to each other. And I think that's a positive thing for any individual. Is we make mistakes. We're made that way, and at the same time, by making, don't quote me on this, make more mistakes, we learn a little bit more from our mistakes.
Hopefully. I know we had there's some conversations that stand out for me. I know when we spoke, for you it's those earlier discussions, because you say it was raw.
Well, I had to leave you, didn't I? I couldn't.
You got on a jet plane. I don't know when you'll be back again. Type of situation.
I had to go away, and I had to go and do what I do.
You do your stuff, absolutely.
Which I passionately love. I love doing what I do, as a storyteller, to tell these stories and listening to the stories that you brought forward.
Yeah.
It sort of enhances yourself as an artist. You have to, because observation is very important in my line of work. Because in my line of work, you have to certain time represent the realities of where we are. So listening to them, I think has been fantastic. We had that amazing guy who loved writing poems and
Evan
poetry.
Isaac, the
There
ambassador,
you
the
go.
High Commissioner.
Forgive me. I can't remember the names or whatever. But again, those little sparks remain with you. And I said, what? He's a poet? Oh, wow.
Yeah.
And then he read some of those poems to us, which is great.
Absolutely, because I remember those. It's really weird because when I look back, they're almost like images in a book, and I can flick the page and you remember the person, the conversation with his.
Yeah.
He told us this story about how a man is at the time His Excellency. He goes to invite to a conference and they give him a china cup, and 2 years later he's no longer that His Excellency, and so the same people invite him back, but now he has to pay for his own ticket. He doesn't get a coffee from a china cup. He has to go to a vending machine, put money in, and he gets this polystyrene cup. And he goes, but surely we're all like that, aren't we? We're all polystyrene cups. We like to think that we're china cup type of coffee made. And it was fascinating because this is a guy who is a high-ranking diplomat, and he's discussing it. And then we had the head of state, didn't we? We had a president that came on, and we've had members of royalty, and then we've had those on the fringes of society.
But saying that, we've had the ordinary, and
Everybody.
That's great as well.
Absolutely.
And we're celebrating those ordinaries as much as we may look at these ambassadors. We were really in search of those little stories,
the human experiences.
About that Indian girl who recently, I think she wrote a book about from domestic violence. And how she liberated herself out of that and be in a particular situation. And I think those are as much as to celebrate as achievements.
Absolutely. And I think
running of governments,
because we had the stories that stick with us. And I think the beauty of it is, it's like you always say, it's a campfire. And we're sitting around the campfire. And there's no images that are there apart from the flickering flames and the stars above. It's very romantic campfire now, obviously. Violins in the background and everything else.
Is it at night? Is it happening at night? By the twinkles of the stars,
twinkles.
And all these people are individuals bringing their bits of, different types of food and ideas.
And you got the gentle breeze that's whispering in the ears of past lovers of delight. But you know what I mean. We're in a campfire, but you got these books, you got these stories, and you get them captivated because when somebody's being authentic on those, because their voice drops, it changes, and all of a sudden, it's verbal photography. I think that's what Kevin mentioned. It's these images that come to life. I know we did one on some real heavy issues we had on alcoholism. We won the award. The podcast we did looking at autism, for example, in the UK.
I mean, the stories from South Africa were really interesting.
They were chilling.
What was happening at that time within the two communities and the segregation between them on a social level as well. I think that was kind of really weird and kind of saying, where is the sense of belonging for a particular community?
It was spine chilling because in some of them you could hear gunshots in the background because we had them right in the fierceness of the riots that were taking place. And the whole
But we were safe in our homes.
We were safe, but we had our correspondence there.
That's it, because they could communicate because the world wasn't listening. Like you say, people don't know this is happening.
No. And it was like the world was... The silence from the world was deafening. And what was weird was at this moment where where a lot of people were talking about this wokeness, that we're now collectively coming together, and you had this community of people that were just absolutely scared, and they're just hoping that people knew that they existed at this moment when everyone's fighting for a sense of equality. And it just showed unfortunately the fragility of life. But then we've had other stories, you know, like the alien hunters of India, through to obviously one of my favorite ones that have been, and they've all been great favorite ones. But I love the conversation with the medicine man in the deep, dark jungles of Costa Rica, where we're doing this podcast recording with him, Kuli, and you could hear animals that you think are only in existence in Jurassic Park, you know, coming in the background. You think, where on earth am I? And obviously the conversation itself was very ethereal, you know, it was an amazing discussion, but it shows that there's a diversity in the human experiences to be had, which I think is a great thing to have.
And the lady, wasn't it, that she started a restaurant in Venezuela, somewhere around there?
In Uruguay,
Uruguay,
absolutely.
there I go. You've really traveled the world, haven't you?
Uruguay. Come on.
Maybe we should open up a restaurant in Venezuela then.
I think we did try and do a podcast in Venezuela. So some of the ones that we did record, but we couldn't manage to get out. We had this amazing podcast recording with a person in Venezuela. And this was at the time where there's a lot of roughness that was taking place, because what a lot of people don't realize was that there was a big Indian community in Venezuela at one point. But unfortunately, because of the changes, a lot of people had to leave. Midway through the podcast that we're doing with this person, the internet goes. And it was really surreal, really, really surreal. Because I'm trying to get hold of them, and a day goes past, 2 days go past. And when we finally get in touch, that person's computer had been confiscated the very next day.
Look at that.
And it's scary. Yeah, so we've had some really weird situations. We've had...
What due to have communicating with us like this?
Got no idea. I can only speculate because of the context and the context of that conversation, what we're looking at. And because remember, this was on the back of, we were talking about the things that are happening in South Africa. We took on the big identity impacts there. We had a look at what was happening in other parts of the world. And then all of a sudden, there's this common theme that's emerging. Okay, hang on. All of a sudden, you've got these journalists, and we've got our own correspondents in different countries, people that write in on a regular basis. And so, all of a sudden it cuts up and you think, is madness. And then we went into the production world, didn't we? We did our history of Indianness, where we went full on into the wonderful, wacky world of Kulvinder Ghir, but we took on those theater likes. We had music in the background, we had the soft echoing to bring together the actual stories that defined us. We went through history.
Well, this is it, you know. We're, as Indianness of being nomadic and being everywhere. We have. I certainly believe that we adapt into any form, into any culture, and take the best bits out. You know, that's in our nature as Indians. Not specifically in a land that we maybe were born in.
Yeah,
we've taken something from there and taken it somewhere else, and we've adapted to it.
Yeah,
and made it ours. And if not, by adapting to it, we offer something else, something more in there.
There's a quote that you said in one of them. I remember laughing because it was about Lenny Henry?
Yeah.
He was in, and the whole notion was saying, actually, your skin color does not dictate your national identity. It can't dictate your national identity. And it's the fact that you were born in Kenya. You are Kenyan through and through. And it's this idea of saying, well, I'm proud to
as much as my informative years are from Yorkshire, I see myself more as a
Yorkshire man, the tease.
All right, I was 7 years in Kenya, in Africa.
Oh man, you have just blown my whole story now. I can't even go back
sorry
to
about
it.
that.
It's like you just ruined it. I had the whole thing building up there, you know. But it was about that. It was
and then I became, you know, once you become an actor, you become totally nomadic. You actually become hopefully you turn into a blank canvas.
One needs to be careful there, but that's what I mean. Even that part has been interesting because in your world over the last 100 weeks, if we look at that has changed dramatically because you have been this celebrated mind for many of a generation because you broke the mold. You you looked at some of the big issues in society, especially what you did on the Goodness Gracious Me sketches, which is really an incarnation of it, because you said, let me take something that people use as a stereotype and let me break it down to the simple fact of comedy, to the sense that we can actually laugh about it with each other. And then all of a sudden...
Well, we can laugh together, see?
Yeah.
That was the idea. You know, we laugh together, not only as a nation, but as the whole world itself. That one thing that we do share is humor. Sometimes humor can be very dark as well and real. And I think what was good about the program was that we took upon those stories from the generation and the experiences of the migrant, really. And we find that we're all migrants, we're always moving, and then we have those experiences, and then we bring those experiences out. And I think some of those experiences are expressed from a different idea and a different culture, and they see and they can relate with that program of telling those different stories. And there's not any indifferent.
There isn't. There's one sketch that you did that still makes me laugh because it's so obvious within the podcast that we do, and how the sketch goes. And this is not your red book of let's look at Kulvinder Ghir's life, you know, that's TV show. But there was a sketch that you did where you had the English guy and he goes, my family had been in the United Kingdom since 16th century. That makes me British. And I can look down on this guy. And then you had the next guy saying, well, I've been here for 3 generations. I'm British, but not as British as him, but I'm more British than him. And then you're there saying, well, I just got here last week. Does anybody need a taxi? And what was really smart about it was actually showcases the human nature, saying we want to have some form of exclusivity over our perceptions of identity.
Again, see, that was turning it on his head, because that original sketch was done by Monty Python, but not in that format. It was put into a social idea, in a working class and an upper class and a middle class. And all these things are quite related with each other, you know. So, and being any migrant who comes into a country in that respect is he wants to better his life. And what you had here was everything that was needed to better your life. Free national health care, you know, you had free education, and hopefully we don't lose those things, which is really, really important. And this kind of created a really good foundation to build something upon when the migrant came over. And then they asked for equality as well. Because who runs the NHS? Who runs the schools, really, you know? So it's, I remember a story, we should really talk to him as well, whether he's alive, I don't know. He was we should talk to him, because it was, he became the first South African black teacher who came over in the 50s, or was it the 60s? And in the East End of London, Mr. Baker, I'll call him. And Mr. Baker started to teach in a very rundown area in the East End of London. And he said, and he was called in the East End of London towards Ilford, at a school called Loxford. And his idea was that from Loxford, I would take students and make them go to Oxford.
There you go.
And the belief of that, of a teacher, of the passion behind that, to give that kind of positive vibe within the students, to achieve their goals. I think we should talk to Mr. Baker if you're still
I think we should. I think, and if he isn't, let's reach out if we can find his family members.
Daughter became she became a lawyer because she was half South African and half German.
Oh wow!
Living in the East End of London.
And there's a beauty of that as well. That's the thing.
There you go. And she would, and I think she changed the immigration law until Cameron came along and changed it again.
Enough said about that side.
And then the realization of saying, like, wait on, what is being British?
And I think that's the thing, though, isn't it? What we've done over the course of 100 conversations is almost nitpick beyond the politics, beyond the passport, beyond any of those type of ideas, but actually coming from the human being experience to say, what translates to real identity, and how far do you have to go to have a sense of perceived belonging for one side? And I say that intentionally because it is this social construct. And on the other side, how far are we truly willing to go to have absolute freedom? And that's the important element of that.
Yeah, choice. We can only give I look at it, our children, in the sense of idea of freedom. Is their freedom we want, and obviously with freedom, like Martin Luther King says, becomes great responsibility.
I always thought that was Spider-Man for some reason.
Oh,
It's like,
listen, you can take a lot of stuff and put it into Marvel.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah. Absolutely, we've seen that as well.
They do a lot of that kind of stuff. I don't mind it in a way, because it's one way of getting a message across.
Well, talking about messages, we had so I think I sent it over. We had fan mail that came in,
Okay.
and it was big. We've had a lot of different emails that came in, but there's one in particular that was a real eye opener for me, because it was the conversation we had actually fairly recently with Naila Amin, who's now our ambassador, and it was about ending child marriage. And this woman went through this horrific experience, and her life actually then led to the state of New York to change its laws to ban child marriage. So you cannot get married under the age of 18 in New York, regardless, right? So we kick off this big campaign with her. But this email that came in, she's not of Indian origin or any extract, and that doesn't really matter because a lot of people aren't that listen in. But her story that she shared was saying, this is what happened to me too. And I found a lot of belief, because in the back of this podcast, it enabled me to say, actually, it's possible that I can make a difference, that I can do something. And so what we found is this mooring ground. We've started to build this living encyclopedia, but also an ecology, that people are starting to have belief, a bit like that teacher saying, actually, you can think differently. Actually, it is possible. And also almost pushing those levers of what society says within particular countries to say, I don't have to accept this anymore, because it's no longer having to be part of my experience. And one thing you said to me right at the beginning, I remember when we took in this notion of Britishness, you said, Rajan, well, it doesn't matter if somebody says you're not British, because it's up to you whether you believe it or not. They can say
you can make it up. You make your own Britishness.
Absolutely.
Make your own British, what your ideas are, and that's and make it a great Britain then again, because we're allowed that. You should be allowed that, that sense of identity, because of that, the empire itself and the existence, how kind of the idea of what Britain is.
There's a telltale chuckle there, Cully. It's like we'll reserve that over a cup of coffee and a cigar of sorts.
Well, I'll have the coffee.
You'll have the coffee. I'll have the cigar. But it's
but it is on the side. I might have a bit of a laddu.
Because it's Britain. It's British. It's made in Southall.
Right.
It's But it is that idea of saying your identity does not have to have the arbitrary factor of skin color attached to it, because modern day world is changed. An African is Kuli as much as a Indian is somebody like Cliff Richard. Because the reality is, if you're born in that region, then that means you have that sense that's identifiable.
Yeah, you do. You all right. 7 years there, 3 years in London, then until then 7 years in Yorkshire. My informative years, and that's where my mum is in Yorkshire at the moment. Yeah. So I always identify home as Yorkshire as well.
Yeah.
And then my life, as nomadic as it is as an actor, you get to see the world and you travel. So it's never it's never a place
Yeah.
for me in that way. I think, and I enjoy that. I don't, and that's what I love about being British.
Yeah.
Is being able to kind of really have, a piece of land where you identify yourself and the culture that you are brought up in, but the culture kept on changing. It didn't stay in one place.
No.
And that I think then people are very progressive in that. You can be very progressive because you're willing to learn.
Absolutely. And that's the thing. That's where we started. I know we spoke about this at length before, is the fact that you have the progressives, those out there saying, let me learn more, let me see the world as it is, not just how I am, but as the world truly is. And then you have those who look to conserve, not in the political sense, but those who look to conserve, to keep those forms of tradition that really are only 1-2 generations deep. So they're never really set in stone in any sense. But because most times it's out of fear, rather than actually saying we can adapt. And there's a part in our human ingenuity, maybe it's in our evolution, but I think that there's this stunningness.
I mean, I think look now within the idea of what's happening in the world itself, and what I mean by that is the movement of ecologically, the environment. That's the word I was looking for.
Yeah.
And I think the young people, the young generation, are really looking at that and looking at the environment, because all of a sudden we've been given this kind of a ticking clock.
I think also there's more exposure, isn't there? Because now we're more familiar to what the issues are and how it impacts in a very selfish manner, but how it impacts us. Before it used to be, climate change is really bad. Look at these people on the other side of the world and how bad their lives are, whilst we continue eating our fish and chips on the other side of the planet. Now all of a sudden it's, by the way, this story is coming to you. Look how this is impacting your country. And now we've woken up to the fact that we're all in the same boat, and that boat is starting to sink. And unless we come together as human beings, then we only have one destined out there. And I know there's a philosophy that you speak about to me, which is dying whilst alive. And I know there's a lot of depth in there reserved for another podcast, but looking at that philosophy is something that we need to start adapting now in our own society.
Well, this is it. It's in one way, what I'm saying is, in a progressive sense, the children of the future are asking those questions for the world that we're leaving them with. Hopefully, I don't know, because I can't predict the future. I don't have the ability to, but we leave it in good for our children to change the future that we were heading for, especially in an environmental sense.
And it's for us to empower them as well, to know that they can make those changes, that the ideas can do that.
You can put the plastic in a different dustbin and then
and hopefully then the council puts it in the right dustbin at the end of it. Otherwise it's a great exercise of bureaucracy. Absolutely.
Those little changes like that can help, and I think no one should sit down and not live their dreams, go for their goals and live their dreams for what they want, as much as they know that those little things in life will make a change. Within the world itself. And the consumption is immense, the human population has grown so much as well, the consumption. But those are the stories we want to hear. Those are the things we wanted to know. Hopefully, we know our idea wasn't to pick or criticize or judgment on anybody. It's just listening to the movement of people.
Absolutely. And that's the beauty of it, because it crafted its own tapestry. Its embroidery went to over 48 countries, and somehow unanimously they started carving the same images. And that's the beauty of what this has done, because it's the greatest case of anthropology of our time, that time capsule that says If you want to know what the world was like during these times of COVID, well, you can really have a look at the human evolution of what COVID meant to people over the course of 100 weeks. And then what does that flourish into? Because then what kicked off from there has now turned itself a worldwide movement. We have our own ambassadors. We haven't got a flag, but like you said, the flag will be transparent. It will have no edges. It will just continue in the ether there.
Yeah, let it float. Let it float in the wind, you know, and it should be transparent because that was the goal itself.
Yeah. A mooring ground.
A foundation where people were very open, very able to talk, and we can get those stories and we can document them, and that's hopefully we started this journey of, and they'd be progressive. There'd be new stories, there'd be new ideas, there'd be new ways of thinking, and we want to hear those. We want to know where a movement of people, where they've arrived at the moment. And we don't want to take the idea away that this is a picnic, you know, and everyone's welcome to it.
It is.
I think you're more restricted than anyone else as a traveler, and because as a journalist, as a writer as well, within picking up this, you've seen what's been happening in those real world. I mean, do we go where the government says to stay at home and work? Do you prefer that, or do you prefer to be actually on the front line?
Being out there, I want to see the world as it is, not through the visor of my computer screen. Absolutely, it's a no-brainer, because that's my life.
Like when we take that picture, you know, we're constantly looking through the camera. We forget to actually look above it. And see more real for what it is sometimes.
That's it. And I think that's what it is. These conversations will continue. Like we'll push it as long as we can get them going, and it's going to evolve. I know that we'll have new people coming on board to take over the podcast. So then it starts changing his language and we get a greater reach. But what's really important is that the travel elements there is plunging into the human experience behind our senses of identity. Not looking at Indianness as this square structure that's got jagged edges and sharp sides, but saying, actually, all forms of identity are fluid. But if we're going to really do justice to our civilization, our species on this planet, well, let's have a look at the humanness behind it. What are those shared stories? And these are the stories that you can only find on location. And that's the reality of it. From the conversations I had with you, from the bars and the side street corners in the middle of nowhere to the temples that you think, how on earth or why on earth are they there? These are the things that actually captivate us. And I think it drives our spirit for voyage. You know, maybe I was born in the wrong era. I don't know, but I feel like I need to be like in a sailing boat or something. It's like, I need to be out there.
I think that's it. You want to, is that the experience, you know, to actually be there and smell the place. To actually, you know, the realities of that reaction. Certain things can be conveyed through the camera, but the realities is being there.
You have to feel it, right? The story, because that's when you digest the stories, and when you write about them, you do true justice to what there's about, because you understand the complexities of it, but also the intricacies, how it has an impact on so many more different areas. It's there's a lot to be said there. You always reverse these interviews on me somehow. Nobody else does it, but you always tend to do it. So on that note, you know, this was a bit of a self-congratulatory podcast. It is 100th episode. I think we deserve that as well, right? It's we have done great work on there. So
we have to celebrate that, because look, we're learning. You know, we're constantly learning of these individuals, you know, where they are in their situations, what empowers them,
and we also learn
history and where they've come from.
We've also learned how to use the microphone and how to edit and how to switch on the computer and how to make sure we don't have dodgy Wi-Fi anymore. You know, there's a lot of self-learning there. I don't know if a lot of people realize, but the first couple of episodes, we had these really weird mics that you get on the phones, and we're trying to record it on that side, and the washing. I remember we did one episode with the president, Donald Ramatar, and he had the fan on in the background. And so editing it through, I was trying to get rid of this sound. It felt like it was next to a jet engine that's coming through. So you learn all the editing tricks that are coming through. And now, obviously, you finally get to hear our matured voice. on the wonderful sounds of the Global Indian podcast. But on that note, I'm going to give you the final message for our 100th episode, which hopefully we can turn into an NFT one day, because that's where the whole world is heading to in terms of tokens. What's your final message for this 100th anniversary?
Thank you. Thank you for sharing these stories. And we're going to have one big picnic one day. and all is invited.
Absolutely.
Everyone's
Absolutely.
invited to that picnic.
Yeah.
That's what my thing is, and if everyone is invited and they all speak different languages, we'll deal with that. We'll get to that same place.
Yeah, it is.
In that communication of it, we speak the same language in our hearts.
We do. We do.
And we have the same goal.
One thing that I always admire about you, Kuli, is that you talk about the most deepest societal issues, but you do it through the vise of humor. And what that does, it cuts through. But it's such a magnificent talent that you have. I'm constantly learning from you, my brother, but it's a great learning curve indeed. Until next week, where we celebrate our 101st podcast as we continue these global Indian journeys, these journeys into humanness.
And on behalf of my good friend and my brother, Rajan, let's get more people on this board on our picnic. Let's carry on kind of being positive with it and build on it, and I think if we can do that, we can make a change.
Wow, 100 podcasts so far. A massive thank you to you, the audience, for giving us the energy to continue coming up with these stories and also making your incredible recommendations of guests that we should be covering, as well as topics. In fact, if we have a look at the history of Indianness, it was totally audience-led, as well as that of the conversation with Adam Habib and many others. If you too would like to join our global Indian stories and you have a story to tell or suggestion, well, reach out directly via the website. You can get us via www.globalindianseries.com. There you can see this podcast and the entire repertoire of discussions so far. Hope you enjoyed this session, and I look forward for you continuing the journey with us next week as we continue our 50 Shades of Brown self-discovery.
Global Indian Network. Print, TV, events, podcasts. Find out more at globalindianseries.com.